Rolling.
Okay, so that was the second act, the writer. I had a subtitle under each one of them as well. So the first one, the vaudevillian, had a sub thing called "Everything That Can Go Wrong Will Go Wrong," and the last one, the battler, was "One Man's Dilemma Is Everyone's Possibility." So that was what's on the poster. You want to take a photo of the poster?
I've got a photo.
Okay, all right. And so what would happen is then I would have an interval, because I'm going to change into a third character, a third aspect of me as a clown, whatever you want to call it. And so I'd go and I'd change all this rainbow tights and all that, and I put on a suit. Okay, so I went from the vaudeville outfit to the real clown outfit to the businessman outfit, which was just a nice suit, kind of like a pinstripe, and it was a bit brown, so it was not really bright color, so I went from the bright color to kind of plain drab. The vaudeville costume, by the way, was black and white, and black pants and a white jacket. And I had all these props for the second act. So I had the telephone, and I had the pedestal, and I had a little desk, and I had a chair, and I had the waste can. And the first phase of it was a fire bucket, as I had mentioned before. And then I had this black suitcase, I had the juggling stuff, I had the traveler's suit, I had all this stuff. So this one, I come out, and I've just got a suit on, but I've got a business card. And then I flip it over, and I look at the other side, and I go, okay. I go, Right, I go this way, that way, oh, sorry, that way, right, so, right, start there. So I was following directions. So somebody gave me their business card, and they drew directions on the back, or I drew the directions to get there. And I went down, this way, following the directions that way, this way, this way, come there, get myself ready, big business deal, go this way, and come here. Oh, this is it. This one, this one. Look at the address again. It's the right address, but there's no business here. There's no building here. How can this be? This cannot be. It must be my imagination. No, this is it. It's meant to be right here. And I did a kind of a monologue, but it wasn't a long monologue, so I interspersed it with the dilemma that this man was caught in, that he had the right address, but there's no building here. So I related this, I explained it in an interview, that it was like the moment when you've parked your car and you come out to the parking lot and you can't remember where your car is. And it's what happens in the human mind when we know something is exactly that way and it's not that way at all. And something changes. So it was this piece was about the split second in the human's mind when something goes wrong. When everything, all your reality is shattered. So I spoke a little bit in this, and with that accent, like a kind of a Jewish American immigrant, so to speak. And I didn't know what to do, and I tried to go through in my mind, what did I do wrong? Wait, did I make this phone call? Didn't I write it down? He gave me the card, this is the address, and you go back and forth to it. And finally, you could see that he was getting very stressed out, and you could see him melting down and being really upset. There was no chair there. And then finally, he starts to have a heart attack. And often they grab their arm, I don't know if it's right or left, but whatever, they grab their arm when they have a heart attack and go down. And I had, at this point, there were certain development stages. I'll tell about that in a minute. But at one point, when I had a really good season in the theater, I had met this man named Antoine Saleh, and he was Arab Christian Israeli man who immigrated to Australia with his family. And he had a relative that had a small factory in the Western Sydney, but it was very rough out there. There was a lot of racism that happened towards people from other cultures at that time. And he couldn't get any work in the theater. Now this man, Antoine, he was a graduate of La Sorbonne in directing. So he did a 4-year degree in the 60s. And it coincided with a 3-month Shakespeare festival, and they had Shakespeare shows from countries all over the world. They would come to Paris, and all the students, the directing students at least, they got tickets, and they got to see over 3 months. They got to see all the Shakespeare plays in all these different interpretations, different languages, different theatrical realities. So that was one 3-month period of his director course. The other thing he told me that in the first year, the directing students were not allowed to go near an acting student. So they had the directing students only direct each other, so they could put all their bullshit on each other and have other people who said, this, I don't agree with it. So they could work out all their personal philosophical lies and prejudices on each other and clear that out of themselves. Then they earned the right to then start to treat an actor like a human being. This is at Le Sorbonne, right? So then he graduated and he went back to Israel and directed many theater productions, big and small, all kinds of things. And eventually he became a TV director, very, very good. He went back to the Sorbonne for a year just to study lighting. And then he was back in Israel. And he was also the founder of the Palestinian Theater. So when I visited with him once, he went back to Israel, and he brought me with him to stay with him for a week, so he could show me Jerusalem, where he was staying with a Jewish colleague. And he was in the center of Jerusalem. And then he made a meeting for me and him to go meet with the director of the Palestinian Theater. So we went across the border, and it was a particular period. So the highway that divides East and West Jerusalem, West and East as it were, they had these guardhouses. There was nobody in there because there was no issue. So we just walk across the highway, walk in front of the guard tower, there's nobody in there. Went and had Arabic coffee with the director. Met, talked. Anyways, that's who at one phase directed The Battler for me, Antoine. He was wonderful, and he was like a mentor. He's deceased now. But he had told me, because he had already had a heart attack. So when I went like this, as a heart attack, he says, excuse me, Ira, I want you to know something, that when you have a heart attack, it happens in your arm. He said, so you want me? He said, yeah. I said, okay. So I did that. Anyways, so that's where I left you. So I had the heart attack, and I'm lying on the ground, and I'm still conscious, and the character is, and I plead with, God. You start to plead with somebody. You call your mother, you call your spouse. You call somebody. You plead for somebody. So in this case, this poor schlepper, he's got the biggest. The idea was that he had the biggest contract of his life, and he only needed one more signature. So in the monologue, I would have explained that. And that's why he was crushed, because this was the biggest contract. He only needs one more signature, and it's not possible. So he pleads with God. He says, look, if you let me live, kind of like Wimpy in Popeye, I'll gladly pay you on Tuesday for a hamburger today. It was that thing. So I said, look, if you let me live, I'll do anything. And I said also, and you know, what good is it to live like this after you've had a heart attack and you're useless? I said, I feel useless, like a used condom washed up on the beach, because I lived in Sydney at the time, and they hadn't actually resolved the where the effluent waste went. So it was around the time maybe that they were building this 6-mile or 6-kilometer pipe that went out. So the beaches started to get cleaned up. Hello. You can get that? You got it? I hope it's the one that does the siren. Okay, back here. And so anyway, so I said this thing about the used condom washed up on the beach. That's how useless I felt. And then I said there was a thing about I feel like a man who has eyes but cannot see, who has ears but cannot hear, who has a mouth but cannot speak. And then finally, I keep trying to get up, and I'm knocked down completely. And this, now I'm done. And you can see I died. And I love false endings, so it looks like that's it, you know. And then my hands start to go like this. And it's like the, you know, reaching up to heaven, if you will, whatever. And I pull myself up with the eyes closed. And I come here like this, which I can't do anymore. But I used to go then from here, all the way through, up to a handstand. And then I just do a simple walkover. But as I walked over, my jacket would hang over. So I was like a carcass, you know, something that was not complete in whatever form. And then at some point I come up like this very slowly, and I stand there, and then I turn around, and I go to do a mime walk like that, and I reach in, and somewhere I put my calling card in there, and I drop the calling card, and it floats down like a leaf, so to speak. And then I'd walk a couple extra steps, and I'd get here, and I'm in a suit, and I'd just go like that, and the lights would go down. And that was just blackout. That was the end of the show. I'd come out like that, lights would come up, take a bow, take another bow, and I'd take off my coat, put it down, and I'd do a standing back somersault, salto mortale, and I'd take my coat and exit. That was the battler. That's the story of the battler. So, Casper, any questions? You can ask me with that on if you want. But if you anything that I skipped that I had told you, or any questions at all that come to mind about the show or the creation of it?
Well, I did ask the question how you created it, if it was on the floor, if you sat thinking about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, how I created the Battler, I just had the idea. I wanted to make a one-man show, and what do I feel like doing? And I did have this piece that was the writer already, and I had different vaudeville turns that I had done before, and I had the juggling routine. And so I had different things in it, but the writer I had done. So anyways, I decided to do these 3 phases of the clown, or 3 phases of a clown. That's not the only 3 phases, but it was a way of looking at the inner world of the clown. And I had done other shows about that. I had another show I mentioned that I toured in Scandinavia. I played it in a couple places in the U.S., and I played it in Holland and Germany. That was called A Clown's House, and that was nonverbal, and that was also about the inner world of a clown. I'll tell you about that sometime. But so I created it from material I had, but I had the idea I wanted to do a trilogy, and so I would create it in the rehearsal room, which would have been my living room. It would have been a small room, or I would have done it sometimes if people were home. It was in a share house. I would rehearse in my bedroom, and sometimes I had a little park across the street, really small park, and I could go over there and practice some acrobatic things and some of the juggling and skill things over in the park. So I created it consciously, intellectually. I created it from things I had already done, and then I also created it on the floor. So I did, you know, whatever works, as the saying goes. Yeah. But I had mentioned also that originally when I did the writer, it wasn't so formal, but I still had the telephone, but I didn't have the languages yet, and I was going to do it at the showcase when I was doing the whole Battler. The first time I performed that was at this well-known theater in Sydney called Belvoir Street Theater. So I had already done a show there called An Imaginary Life, based on the David Malouf novel. I played the child, and people liked it and liked what I did and that kind of thing. But the manager of Belvoir at the time, Chris Westwood, she was a wonderful theater person. She was a manager, administrator, but she loved theater. Very important person in the history of the Belvoir Street development. And we talked, and she said, "Well, you can maybe do your show here." So she gave me a Monday night, and there was a show on, but they didn't play on Monday night, so I just had to move the set and stuff back. And I got my very close friends and colleagues who I had taught also at WAPA, and they were now living in Sydney, and that was Fred Copperwaite. At the time, his had a different last name, Ragliota, and they took on his mother's name, and then which is Copperwaite, and Theo Kumbis, and they were classmates at WAPA, and we wanted to start to form a company for them so they could create their own work. Yeah. And so I asked them to help. So Theo was going to run the lights and sound, and Fred was going to do the change of the set between Act 1 and Act 2, set up the table and chair. And what happened, though, I haven't told this, I was going through what was going to happen for the theater for that Monday. This is on the Monday, and this is in my bedroom. And the three of us are talking and saying, "Oh, this is going to happen." And I was acting things out so they could see when to come in just to change the set, which is simple, but it was choreographed. And then Theo had to know when the lights and sound, when his cues were going to be. And then I was talking about this second act as the writer, and all of a sudden I went, "Oh." And I went over, wait a second. Something was happening. I was getting hit with the inspiration. And I went over and I started to do this language stuff. So I came up with the language thing. All the languages right there on the spot, and they watched this happen. And then we didn't have time and went to the theater, and I did it that night. You know? That was in. And then after that, I did a season at the Bay Street Theater. I did a 1-month season. And then that went pretty good. And then I wanted to do it again. And at that point, Fred was helping and running the lights and sound. And one of my mentors, Guillermo Quizarinas, he was a ballet master from Mexico. He was the first ballet teacher for the Sydney Dance Company when it was starting up. I think it was called Dance New South Wales. And he was a mentor of mine. He was also a friend of Harry Haythorne's. Harry Haythorne introduced him to me. And so we wanted to work together, so I got him to come in and change the set. And I had told you this terrible story. So one night at the Bay Street Theater, on the table, I would knock everything over. It was so nicely set up, and I used to lean on it and do a fall. But the table had already fallen, and the top was loose, and when I leaned on it, it went like ice. So I took a bad fall, and I didn't break anything or anything like that, but I could have, but I went very quick, so I didn't have a control of it. But I jammed, it was like I jammed my spine, and my back went out. You know, the back goes into a spasm. When it's shocked, it goes, and it holds. So I was like on the floor, I was like, and I had to do the whole second act with all the juggling and all that. And of course, I couldn't do the handstand and up, you know, it's like, and I faked my way through it. And I finished at the end, and I had to really crawl down, you know, like I couldn't fall down, and I died like that. And then I more or less had to kind of crawl out like this, and I go out, and by this time, Guillermo had seen something. He heard the big crash, something happened, and he said, "What happened? What happened?" And I'm coming off, and he's helping me like this, and he was an old man at that time. He was about the age I am right now. He was in the early 60s, and he helps me out. And Fred, of course, saw that there was an accident and there was a wreck, so he came backstage, and they had to help me. They said, "Don't do it, don't do it." And I said, "No, I gotta do it. I could hardly talk." I said, "How are you gonna do it?" I'll be okay. I don't know. I was crying. All this, and I'm holding on to I'm holding on to Fred or Guillermo, one of them, and the other one had to help me get my tights off, and then they had to dress me, literally. Oh, and I go, oh, and then they were like going, "Oh my God, talk about poor clown." And then Fred had to go up, yeah, and Guillermo had to walk me over to the entrance, make sure I'm okay. And I went out, and I did the whole businessman, you know, with the calling card and all that, as best as I could, you know, speaking like this, you know. And then I finished, didn't do a back salto. I took a bow and I got out. And then they come backstage, of course, to see how I am. And I take a taxi, I go home. I didn't have a lot of money. Took a taxi out to Clovelly, where I lived. And then the next day I got acupuncture. Had the day off. So that would have happened on a Sunday night, the accident. And then on Monday I went to acupuncture. And then I think Tuesday, maybe I went to get another acupuncture treatment. And then I was back on stage doing the whole show again on Tuesday night as scheduled. And then by Wednesday night, the next night, I was able to do a back salto at the end, and everything was okay. Finished the season, you know, all that. And that's what happens when you're young, dumb, and healthy. And yeah, so that's, you know, some of the things about the Battler. And David Malouf came to see the Battler at Bay Street, and then I had after show, not dinner, but I ate over at his house, which was not far from Bay Street, and that was very nice. He was very supportive. And then we were talking, and he said, "No, who wrote your show?" And I said, "I did." I said, "Was all right?" And he said, "That's very good." He said, "You just I was just asking, and you just got to be careful who you listen to." Because what he wanted, because it was authentic and it was original, and he couldn't understand, you know, did somebody else write that? They couldn't. Whereas if you start listening to dramaturgs and you start listening to literal people, they'll ruin, they make things boring. So that was a warning from the writing master. Be careful who you listen to. Yeah?
Yeah.
Best dramaturgical lesson I ever had in my life.
Great.
Okay?
Yeah, I gotta go.
All right.
So,
Thanks,
signing
Casper.
out.